Welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports. Obviously, this is not something that RJ or myself had planned. I'm in Westlake Park right now because it's a busy Wednesday. Because the Kraken have placed goaltender Philipp Grubauer on waivers with the purpose of sending him down to AHL affiliate Coachella Valley. RJ, uh, before we get into talking about stuff like people have brought up buried contracts, other stuff like that, what it might mean. Just what was your knee-jerk reaction to seeing this? Because I know, I don't know if you want to mention it, but it seemed like you might have thought this was coming.
Yeah, I mean, look, my knee-jerk reaction, I guess, was just that, wow, they actually did it. But it wasn't a huge surprise to me. I had a feeling that this might be coming after last night, just from being in the building, like you and I both were. But I don't know, just the energy around everything made me suspect that a move like this might be coming. And so I did end up actually just making a graphic for it just to have it ready for Instagram last night as I was lying awake in bed, just on the off chance that maybe they did decide to put him on waivers. But I think when you look back at it, it shouldn't be a huge surprise, just given the play this season. He has statistically been the worst goalie in the NHL. And while not everything is on him, I think there are a lot of defensive deficiencies. I understand the team wanting to try something different.
Yeah, and I think like after, you know, Twitter does a stupid thing where it resends notifications, and it just resent me that one. So thanks for reminding me about that, I guess. Uh, um, I think after kind of sitting with it, in the like 10 minutes after it happened, I think that was kind of what I had thought about it is, and I know you guys have talked about it on different things, whether it is the great stuff you do on Patreon with Armchair GM, different stuff, all the content we can plug. This would take to be competitive next year, they need to retool, right? And it will require some hard decisions. I expected them to, come to this sort of decision after the season, not quite right now, but what this move told me ultimately was they are a little bit more ready to make those big decisions, and kind of get ready with that. So I don't know. I know that it's kind of been laid out like there will more than likely not be anybody who picks him up off waivers. I feel like that's just kind of a certainty, right? Just with that
Yes.
contract. Do you have any idea if you think he'd play? Because I think Curtis with Sound of Hockey said that mentioned that the Coachella Valley does have 4 games or so before Four Nations. So there's this idea that he'll go down and get some work in, and maybe it'll be a tune-up. But it just feels like with the contract, with the age, where this franchise is, this just might be a final move. I don't know. What do you think about just chances of him coming back at all, or what this might mean for his future?
Well, I think as far as his future in Seattle, it's all going to depend on how it goes in Coachella Valley. I haven't seen anything that suggests he's not going to report down there. I imagine he will report. He'll try and get some games in Coachella Valley and try and get his game back. And maybe that could be good for him too, getting a few just lower pressure reps with a different team in front of him. I think that could be good for him. And yes, 100% chance. I mean, if you could go higher than 100%, I would, that he will not be claimed on waivers. So, and we'll find that out for sure at 11 a.m. tomorrow, or I don't know when this is dropping, but 11 a.m. He'll be on waivers for 24 hours. That is how it works.
Yeah.
So he'll go unclaimed. He'll report to the Firebirds and just try and get his game back. And I think it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that if he plays well in CV, that he could earn another call up. I think the Kraken want to get him right. They want to rebuild his confidence. He is still under contract for another couple of years,
Yeah.
so they have an incentive to do that. But at this point, I just think it's too far gone. I think it was already very likely that we'd see a buyout in the offseason. I think now it's extremely likely. I would be shocked if anything else really happened with this, because that contract is untradeable also.
Yeah. And that was the thing is, I'm sure you get it as well, as someone who's obviously heavily in this space and on socials, like trade Grubauer, like that's just not happening. Like unless you find someone who's willing to take the contract and you throw in a hell of a sweetener, or sweeteners plural, right? Like that's just not, it's unrealistic. There's just it's such a fascinating thing to me. I guess so I don't keep stuttering. Do you have any thoughts on who they bring up? Because I think ECHL transaction log showed Victor Ostman being called up by Coachella Valley, and the obvious choice seems like Alex Steska. Just because I mean he's been here, he's the more senior of the two goalies in Coachella Valley, and I don't imagine Nicky Coco is at all ready for an NHL stint right now, unless you are sitting him on the bench and just riding Joey until Four Nations, which also doesn't seem like a great idea either. Do you have any thoughts on backup goaltend, at least for this season? Because I know going forward, and we might have talked about this when we talked about Joey Decord's extension, like you will need to find someone else to back up Joey next season, and I don't imagine it's either of the guys currently in CV for different reasons.
No, they would have to go get somebody else. But right, I think it's probably Stetska. It's almost certainly going to be Alex Stetska. You don't want to call up Nike Coco and have him play behind this defense the way that they're playing. I mean, that's a way to really mess with his confidence, ruin his development. I think it's a lot better to keep him down in CV, and he's still young. He's still developing. And Stetska has been the call up previously this season when Joey Decord was injured. Stetska came in as the backup. So I think he's pretty clearly the guy that they're going to bring up. I would love to see him get a start or two. He still has not played an NHL game. So I think that'd be just awesome for him in his career. We both know, from being in the locker room, he's got a great personality. He's a fun guy, easy to root for. So I'd love to just see him get in an NHL game. He has that accolade as part of his hockey career. And then as for Stezka, do I think he'll really do better than Grubauer? But I mean, if the defense plays the same way, no, I don't think he'll do a whole lot better just because it takes elite goaltending to have any kind of a chance of making it work, as we've seen with Joey Decord. I don't think Stezka's an elite NHL goaltender. I don't think anybody does. But I do think he actually, numbers-wise, will probably end up doing a little bit better just because I really think the other major reason to do this now, as opposed to just kind of wait it out in the offseason. Oh, hello there. Got a pigeon walking around you. But the other reason to do this now is just to send a message to the rest of the team, because I think that is a secondary goal for this is – after the last game, and you and I were there in the room when Dan Bilesma was saying it, that they hung him out to dry. That's the way he described the goaltending
Yeah.
situation and didn't put it all on Grubauer. And so I think part of this is just a message to the rest of the team that this is what happens when you play this way. And now Grubauer, even though he hasn't been playing well, he's going to have to suffer for the way that you all are playing. And so it kind of in the way that you pull a goalie in a game, I feel like this is just a larger
Mm,
version of that. And I mean, if you've watched the last three starts from Philipp Grubauer, you've seen what it looks like when a team just doesn't show up and you have to pull a goalie, even though it's not entirely his fault, to try and send a message. And so I think that's really what this is going to be. And we'll see how the Kraken team in front of Stezka responds.
yeah, I think like you mentioned in the beginning of this, kind of how things felt after the game. Like we had to wait quite a bit for Dan Bilesma after the game for his post game presser. I know obviously, with the post game lives that you guys do, I know you trying to get out of there as quickly as you can, to join Dylan for things. So it's maybe there's a little bit more stress. I don't know how you view it, but it's always interesting whenever I agree. After any game, the coach or the manager just takes longer. And this thing seemed weird. Even after the post game availability in the locker room, like normally the goalies are there after every game and you can kind of see him, even if it's quickly. I just didn't see Grubauer at all. It seemed like his stuff was already way gone. And I thought that was a little weird. Um, it just wasn't a great night. It was mom's night, another mom's night, right? Like to have things go that way in front of the moms isn't great. But well, and to your point as well about what Bilesma said, I know both Brandon Montour and Elliot Tolvanen both said they just didn't play up to this. They weren't up to snuff, for lack of the direct quote. And I know Ellie was asked, I think, also about the defensive breakdowns, and I think our media got cut right there. They said, "That's it, we're done." So yeah, things were a bit tense last night. You mentioned kind of the like wake up call essentially, and while you know in a vacuum, a wake up call right now is interesting because it's like, in my opinion, if you haven't woken up by now, this is a lost cause. Um, in that vein, though, going back to what I've mentioned with how you guys have talked about a retool, do you think this might signal bigger things happening? Because I know early in the season, in the preseason, with all the contracts and everyone healthy at the time, it seemed like Brandon Tanev's contract might be something that says, okay, you're going to move this before the deadline, but he's obviously stuck around. Folks have been very critical of Andre Burakovsky. Like, do you think, in the near future we see anything drastic, or it might just be, at the deadline, like this is as official as it gets that this is a selling team. It's been obvious all season, right? But they've obviously been trying to win as well with how they've played Joey Daccord. So I don't know. Do you think we see anything more drastic soon?
I don't think this is really an indicator of that. Although I will say I was a little surprised that just the franchise was willing to do it. This is a team,
Yeah.
and especially Ron Francis, a GM, that seems hesitant to make anything publicly look like there were big mistakes made and really own up to something like this. And so I do wonder if that means he's willing to make some larger moves at the deadline. But I just think already you were going to sell off the UFAs. Already, I think they were probably going to look into shopping one or two guys on contracts that go longer than this year. I mean, Oliver Bjorkstrand already rumored in trade talks.
Yeah.
Burakovsky's name out there. I don't know that you could really move him, but if you can, I think you take advantage of that opportunity. But I think they're still going to be looking at all the same things. But really, it just points to larger changes that need to be made this offseason, and particularly with the Grubauer buyout, which I figured is probably already coming, but this makes it look more likely. But maybe it shows also they're willing to potentially buy out an Andre Burakovsky. I mean, there are a few guys that you could look at buyouts or trying to just retain money on a contract as well in the offseason. And so this is the first step toward admitting that massive mistakes were made
Mm.
and that big changes are needed.
Yeah, and I was hoping that they'd come to that sort of realization because I I don't know if I'll mention it directly, but there are folks who will bring up the playoff season, right? And I'm like, it like pointing to that is not something that's realistic to, be like, oh, this is the formula. This was the formula. This team needs a new direction. It needs serious changes. And yeah, I like you're saying, kind of saying, I am glad that, maybe they are finally ready to admit some of that and go through with that. And then to kind of wrap you up here, unless you have anything else you want to talk about relating to this, just I know, I'm not as well versed in hockey as you are, but like growing up playing soccer and as a defender especially, I knew when I made a mistake, like that's on me. And if it ends up in the back of our net, obviously Philipp Grubauer, like there's a lot of things that go into him. He's a very polarizing player for this team. Whether it is the contract, he's dealt with injuries here as well at different points in his career. Uh, no one's ever questioned his character, right? I mean, you and I know as guys that interact
Yeah.
with him pretty often. He does all the PR things they want him to do. He's very great with fans. Like the German gentleman nickname doesn't come out of nowhere, but just the contract, the play, the numbers all factor into how people have viewed him, and obviously now how this decision has made. Just how do you reflect on his time here? Because obviously, like you said, he could come back. He very well could be back here after some time in CV. But at least personally, it always feels like at least to me, again, this is my opinion. You know, I'm not the smartest hockey guy in the world, but it always feels like he did get a bad rap, whether it was because of the contract, and to that point, Ron Francis signed that contract. Like he gave him that contract after being a Vezina finalist. Um, and I know you've talked about in the past, giving goalies long contracts isn't always the best thing. Um, yeah, I don't know. There were just so many games where, things would fall to, I'm not going to swear on this one, fall to, really bad situations. And like Dan Bilesman said, he gets hung out to dry. And I'll admit, obviously there were the saves you need him to make and you want him to make. And he was never a perfect goalie, but I just always feel like he got a bad rap and fans kind of soured on him because of his contract and other things. And it doesn't help either when Joey Daccord plays so well and is he became a fan favorite so quickly last season, right? Like I think there's a lot of factors that go into it, and it's just tough, just if you want to look at it on the human side of things, just because of how good of a human being he was and is. Sorry, didn't die. Jesus Christ, but it's a difficult situation, I guess, is how I wrap everything up.
Yeah, and that with the Grubauer debate, because it feels like we've been having this debate since year one on
Yeah,
this team, right? Is it the defense? Is it the goaltending? I mean, I think when all is said and done, as there's a possibility he may have played his last game as a Kraken last night. I think when you look back at it, it seems pretty clear that it was both. That the defense was
yeah,
bad and Grubauer was bad, and both of
both can
those
be
things
true.
can be true at the same time. And I think that's kind of how we handled it on post game last night. Is just saying, and everyone's arguing, well, no, it's the defense, no, it's the Grubauer. You're both right. The goaltending has been bad, the defense has been bad, and it just leaves an unfortunate situation all around because, as you mentioned, Philipp Grubauer off the ice super nice guy, great guy in the community, always does all these events, and not just the stuff the PR team asked him to do too. He sticks around in Seattle. He's one of the few guys that
Yeah.
I feel like doesn't leave to go wherever their home is, or on vacations, whatever, during the off season. He sticks around in Seattle because I think he loves it here, and I think that's one of those things that really helped endear him to the fans. And I think it says a lot that there were so many big Philipp Grubauer fans, despite the fact that he was, I mean, just statistically since he got here, has been the worst goalie in the NHL, and it's not even close. And the fact that he still has so many great fans despite the on ice stuff, that speaks to his character. It speaks to his personality, and it speaks to just a good human being that I really wishing the best for in Coachella Valley and through his career going forward. Because I do think he's someone that takes a lot of pride in his game and that wants to turn things around in his career. I don't think that'll ever happen in Seattle, but I think there's a chance that maybe somewhere else it could happen. So wishing him the best, and just hope he finds what he needs to in CV.
Yeah, obviously with how young this franchise is, they're starting to build their different aspects of history. Like I can point to different characters of players, throughout different teams. With the Mariners, like there's so many people who are polarizing, right? Like the Philipp Grubauer discussion has, like you've mentioned, has always been prominent with this organization, and with this team, and like you said, this could be it. So I don't know. It's going to be very interesting for me, at least, to kind of watch and see if this does mean anything. It just seemed just 2 days ago, during the morning skate in Edmonton, it seemed like the fan base got a little bit of a boost because Jordan Eberle was on the ice. Yanni Gord was on the ice with the team, and even pregame yesterday. Well, and with the move from John Hayden going down to CV, I thought, oh, maybe Yanni Gord's close. Like, this franchise is in such a unique place, and I know you know that from covering the team like we do. But yeah, it's all very interesting. There's a lot that's going to happen. I'm assuming in the next few months. So I appreciate you coming on in a random Wednesday before we play San Jose tomorrow. I'll try my best to get this out as quick as I can, and I hope the pigeons were a good background. So as always, RJ, appreciate having you on. We'll link everything. And again, the Patreon, as someone who does pay for it, that is my cold hard cash. Like it's always like, again, as someone who does all of this stuff, I can't direct all of my attention to one thing. So having great people, in these different mediascapes like RJ is very helpful, because you hear their thoughts on what they might do and how teams might need to look elsewhere for their future. And so, if you need a recommendation, that's that I'm giving you one right now. So, yeah, Sharks tomorrow, RJ. We'll see how things go. But until I see you tomorrow, until I see everyone else again, take care of yourselves. Be well. Do whatever you can to make today great.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, Jen.
Hey. Where are you going to watch all those Kraken away games?
Kraken away games, making a push. I was thinking of coming here just because Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle Sports, only if that's okay with you.
I mean, I love that idea. Hope to see you here.